We are hearing stories from the Hebrew scriptures that Jesus would have heard as he was growing up. This week, when I read the well-known story of Moses' birth yet again, I was particularly struck by the unusual mention of the names of the midwives, two ordinary Hebrew women. Their names jumped out at me: Puah and Shiphrah. Students of the Bible know very well that when names are recorded in ancient literature, we must pay attention. And when women's names are mentioned, we should really pay close attention because it is so unconventional, it must mean something. I realized that it could be a signal that women, especially ordinary women, might be important in this story and therefore important in the working out of God's purposes. Sure enough, I counted 5 different women involved in saving Moses. Puah and Shiphrah, the brave midwives who practiced civil disobedience by disobeying Pharaoh's orders to kill all the male Hebrew babies. And then there's Moses' mother, Jochebed, who chose to let go of her baby so that he could survive. And his smart older sister, Miriam, whose women's victory song and dance after the people's escape through the Red Sea is one of the most ancient texts in the Bible. And then the kind Pharaoh's daughter, who resisted the injustice of her father's decree by adopting a little Hebrew boy. How ironic that powerful and mighty Pharaoh's schemes for death are undermined by ordinary women with a commitment to life and dignity. The midwives are, in fact, the only women actually named, Puah and Shiphrah. I wonder why. Not even Miriam is named in the actual biblical text of this story, although she certainly plays a very significant role. And notice, Pharaoh's daughter is never named. Listen to this retelling of the story. After the midwives refused to obey him, Pharaoh ordered his soldiers to throw Hebrew baby boys into the Nile River. Unlike the midwives, the soldiers obeyed the command, and fear and grief took hold of the Hebrew people. Among them was a young woman called Jochebed. She was pregnant. Every day she prayed that her child would be a girl like her older daughter Miriam, but when the baby was born, it was a beautiful little boy. Jochebed held her son close and wept over him. How could she keep him safe from Pharaoh? Sooner or later, the soldiers would hear him crying. One day, her daughter Miriam said, "I wish we could build him an ark like Noah did for the animals. Then he would be safe." Jochebed looked at her daughter in amazement. "That's it. Quickly," she said, "go down to the river and gather some reeds. We will build our own ark." Miriam and Jochebed wove a basket out of papyrus reeds and made it watertight. Then they put the baby Moses inside. The little ark with the baby inside floated away down the Nile. Miriam followed it. After a while, it got caught in some bulrushes. Miriam wondered if she should sneak out and push it free. But at that moment, she heard a voice. She heard many voices. A group of women had come down to the river to bathe. "What is that basket caught in the bulrushes?" asked one of them. Go get it for me." Miriam froze. What would the women do when they saw what was in the basket? "It's a baby," cried the woman. "It must be one of the Hebrew babies. Someone has set it afloat on the river to hide it from my father." Her father? Miriam peered through the reeds. Had her brother fallen into the hands of Pharaoh's daughter? What a disaster! But then the princess said, "What a beautiful child. He must be kept safe. I will keep him. My father will not dare touch him if I say he is mine." Miriam had an idea, but it was risky. She stood up. "Your Highness," she called, "you will need a woman who is able to feed the baby. I know someone who could help you." The princess looked at Miriam. She looked thoughtful. "I'm sure you do," she said. "Perhaps you could give her a message for me. Tell her that the baby is safe. If she will nurse him, I will pay her well." "One more thing," added the princess. "Tell her she has a very brave and clever daughter." Miriam ran to tell her mother the good news. There are many, many ways to tell this story, which has been deeply embedded in the larger communal memory of Israel long before it was written down. And when we hear this story as Christians today, we immediately are reminded of the birth of Jesus and how, the way Matthew tells it, the baby Jesus had to be rescued from the soldiers of the wicked King Herod. Jesus himself would have heard the story of Moses when he was growing up in Galilee under the oppressive rule of the Roman Empire, and I wonder if he heard stories about his own escape from a wicked king called Herod. Perhaps he wondered how his own life would become part of the great ongoing story of God's people. Do you ever wonder about that yourself? Perhaps that is what stories like this are for. They make us wonder about the purpose and meaning of our own lives.